We've discussed John Carpenter on this channel as much or more than nearly any other director.
Why don't we just wait here for a little while?
Some of his movies, like The Thing, have gotten a different type of show appreciation via discussions on its behind the scenes and a WTF, a comparison with its novella source material, and a look at what its legacy is in a deconstructing video, amongst a few others.
You gotta be f***ing kidding.
Looking at his catalog, there is a wealth of stuff that is firmly in the horror realm, from Christine to In the Mouth of Madness, Prince of Darkness to Halloween. While he has some movies that are outside that wheelhouse, like the Western homage Assault on Precinct 13 or Academy Award nominated sci-fi drama Starman, Escape from New York is something special. In addition to being one of my favorite films of all time, full stop, it's also sneaky in its ability to horrify. While I won't enrage the comments, yet, by calling it flat out horror, its horror elements stand out more now than ever, especially compared to some of its other parts. Call me Snake as we revisit Escape from New York.
Call me Snake.
Before we get into the crux of what makes this influential 1981 masterpiece more horror-tinged than it seems, let's discuss it as a whole first.
Well, why didn't you ask me? Hell, I know everybody in this town.
What makes this movie so damn special? Starting with the cast, you have Kurt Russell as SD Snake Plissken, who rallied hard for this role to shake his Disney child actor persona.
You haven't got a single thing on this earth to do except for your hair.
And he'd worked with Carpenter already in the late 70s Elvis TV biopic. He came up with a lot of the mannerisms, like the Eastwood-sounding voice and the eye patch, and his lone screenwriting credit would eventually come when the character was pulled out of retirement for the ultimately disappointing Escape from LA. Many of the other actors were or would become involved with Carpenter. Tom Atkins had just done The Fog, Charles Cyphers joined in against Leper Pirates as well as being in Assault on Precinct 13 and Halloween. Jamie Lee Curtis, who only did voice work for New York, was a damn near Carpenter regular at this point, and Donald Pleasance would find roles before and after this movie with the horror master. Looking deeper, you have Adrienne Barbeau, who was married to Carpenter at the time and was also in The Fog, and Harry Dean Stanton, who would go on to appear in Christine. That's a lot of people who made multiple movies with the director. The ones who didn't appear in other movies from Carpenter are just as special and memorable. Ernest Borgnine as Cabby, Isaac Hayes as the Duke of New York, and the legendary Lee Van Cleef as Houck, who plays foil to Snake's antihero while having a mutual respect. Kurt Russell sounding like Eastwood is a fun touch, as Van Cleef had starred opposite the Western legend 15 years prior. All these fun actors and characters miraculously don't get lost in the shuffle of a sub 100-minute movie, and that's due to the plot, which seems simple enough, and the pace at which it moves. That simple plot follows New York City becoming ungovernable after crime rates jump to 400%. In the far-off future of 1997, at least for 1981 purposes, the state is now the one maximum security prison for the whole country. You commit a crime and that's where you go, no parole and no hope. With a world on the brink of war, the US president's plane goes down in the worst spot, and a rescue attempt is made by sending in a lone man. That lone man is one of the quintessential badasses of all time. He doesn't care about your president or your wars. Plissken is an anti-hero like no other.
When I get back, I'm gonna kill you.
He's capable of doing the job, as we see him deftly land the Gulfire plane on the top of a building and protect himself from incoming hordes. He also does what he needs in order to get information or places that have things he needs, or even more vital information. He doesn't always help people when he can, as evidenced by the poor woman being accosted in the tunnels, and he points a gun at nearly everyone that knows him in New York City. He lies and offers promises of escape that he can't deliver on, at least not with certainty. He cares more about the tape that the president is in possession of than the actual president, as that's his ticket to avoiding a head explosion. Even at the end, when he holds the possible fate of the world in his hands, we don't know for sure that any answer the president gives would have made Snake inclined to replace Cabby's music with the speech tape. I mean, that's how you get a song called The Snake Shake named after you in the soundtrack. One thing that really aids the relatively straightforward plot, and I say straightforward even though it's cool and fun in a way that we would make up in our heads as kids using our toys, is a movie trope called the ticking clock that gives us, as well as the main character, something to think about. What's novel here, if not slap you in the face obvious, is that the ticking clock mechanism is an actual ticking clock strapped to Snake's wrist. While we often give John Carpenter movies their rightful praise, it's not only him that creates these things. Love the character of Snake Plissken? You can thank Kurt Russell for making it his own and Nick Castle for helping Carpenter write the script. Love how the movie is shot with its natural light in an otherwise natural disaster of a post-apocalyptic hellscape? Give Academy Award nominee Dean Cundey his flowers for this and a handful of other projects he worked on with Carpenter. Finally, we get a lot of newer movies that have a synth score that gets labeled Carpenter-esque. But look at a lot of his best and most famous scores and you'll find a partner, collaborator, or unexpected guest like Ennio Morricone for The Thing. Here it's Alan Howarth, and boy, if you need to do something in a hurry and want some free anxiety to speed things up, listen to Over the Wall. I always pictured it as Snake's heart getting faster as he knows the timer is ticking away. Escape from New York works as well as it does because the sum of its parts is greater than the whole. Pieces of this movie wouldn't work by themselves either, but when you blend them all together, it creates a stew that is worth sitting down to every time. As you can see, the movie is a brilliant piece of dystopian sci-fi that has been copied and replicated, but never bettered. I did promise you horror though, so let's get into that, starting with the score I mentioned before. While there are tracks that pump you up or make the on-screen action seem more intense than it is, there's also a sorrow and fear that permeates many of the tracks. It's lonely out there for Snake, whether he feels it or not, and when the Gulfire lands inside of New York, the score itself seems to be warning Snake of what's to come. From Across the Roof to Descent into New York, which starts with a literal jump scare both in the score and in the background, the uneasiness we get puts us on edge right until poor Susan Hubley, Kurt Russell's wife at the time, gets pulled down to become a free meal. The perpetrators of said meal, the Crazies, are horrifying in the sense that they're never really explained. In fact, the whole explanation, or lack thereof, from the military guarding the prison about what goes on in there is terrifying. They don't know how the inmates have power that they do, or who's in charge. When Romero, one of a handful of fellow horror director names used by Carpenter for characters, says if they try anything that the president will die, they don't even know he is being held by the Duke or who that is. They know the Crazies exist, but not why they are the way they are, nor do they care to solve that particular underground problem. The fact that a certain population of this prison are cannibalistic tribes with no explanation could have been its own section of the movie, or even another movie altogether. The very idea of the prison itself is a horrible thought for the alternate timeline of 1997 too. The city that was originally hope for anyone from all over the world to seek refuge in is now where we put the worst our country has to offer. The posters and a lot of the advertising had the head of the Statue of Liberty destroyed and on the ground long before the Cloverfield monster threw it across downtown. It also doesn't matter what you did to end up in New York. That's where you will stay. Murderers, white-collar criminals, and everything in between will be forced to figure everything out on their own and form alliances. One of my favorite things to ponder is why Ernest Borgnine's cabbie is even there. He says he's been driving cabs in the city for 30 years, but it hasn't been a prison for that long in the universe. Did he just stay as the uncoordinated chaos hit and the government enacted whatever plan they had for evacuation? Or is he just some sort of serial killer who took the persona of a cab driver and really thinks he's been there for that long?
Oh, that would have been so fine.
On a final note, the writers even knew how horrifying New York had become because as Snake is walking through to get ready for prison, we overhear that you have the option to self-terminate rather than accept your sentence. Maybe it's better to not know what awaits you, and perhaps being euthanized is a better option than trying to escape New York. I mean, look at those poor bums on the raft. We see two prisoners trying to escape, and they let themselves be blown up rather than go back to the city. Escape from New York is one of those movies that only gets better with time, but also is a one-of-a-kind film. We've had multiple attempts at remakes, with Lee Winnell rumored to have a go at it, and even an attempt to bring Kurt Russell's own son in to play the character.
Before we continue with our video, here's a reminder to click the Store tab on any of our JoBlo channels and browse our collection of the latest and freshest designs in our merch store. Go get you some.
It got a fun but underwhelming sequel, tons of comics including a mega Kurt crossover with Big Trouble in Little China, and an attempted video game that sadly never materialized. The character of Solid Snake from the Metal Gear series is as close as we'll ever get to a continuation of a character that is as cynical and badass as Snake Plissken. Luc Besson even produced a movie so close to Escape from New York themes that Carpenter sued and won. If you want to see We Have Escape from New York at home, go check out Lockout. But if you want to watch the movie with a new lease on just how sneaky a horror movie it can be, throw on the new 4K from Scream Factory and remember, the name's Plissken.
Snake?
Thank you for clicking on our video, everybody. If you like what you saw here, please make sure you like the video and subscribe and share with your friends who like this sort of content. JoBlo remains an independent company, and we appreciate all of your support.